mean, we should all just become savvy and sophisticated consumers right now.
Budgeting is another thing that scares people. You can actually make it quite a simple process.
If you had the ear of Rishi Sunak and you just had 1 minute to share an idea about his tax policy, what would that be? I'm going to start with you, Claire. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has obviously had an impact on global markets. Do you have an impact, an update, I guess, on that for PensionBee customers currently?
If you've been reading our blogs, you'll know that PensionBee plans have close to zero investment or direct investment in Russia. But if you've been checking your balance recently, you'll also see that your balance is moving around more than normal. And so the wider implications of war are impacting all pensions. As markets react to the news of the war, they react to the twists and turns in peace talks. And of course, as that global supply of goods coming out of the region is severely impacted as well. But, to put it into context, when big shocks happen, such as war, such as the pandemic, stocks, which we refer to commonly as equities, they'll respond almost immediately. So when Russia invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February, typical global equity stocks dropped by about 1%. They lost about 1% in their value compared to the day before. And that was just in reaction to the news. But if we think about how the market reacted to the pandemic, those same global stocks would have dropped about 9% in one day when we first heard news from the UK government that we had to cease all contact and non-essential travel. So, that's just to put it in context of kind of the drop. Obviously, if you are close to retirement and you have plans to access that money in the short term, it can be pretty anxiety-inducing to watch your balance swing about. But we have to remember that fluctuations are normal behaviour for equities. And, we can expect their value to go up and down in the short term. So even though global equities have gone down this year by 3.5%, if we think about what's happened over the last 3 years, they have consistently gone up 20% each year over the last 3 years. So we need to put it into a bigger context. And of course, even though we've got these bumps in the road now with your pension, it's important not to overreact to the kind of short-term market shocks like these.
I suppose the big question is, what can we do about rising inflation? We want inflation to go down, but how do we go about doing that, Claire?
Inflation is rising costs of goods and services, and that happens when you have less supply and more demand, which we have right now at the same time. So we've got less supply because some parts of the world are still dealing with the pandemic. So across China, we've got new lockdowns. You've seen Shanghai go into lockdown. So millions of people across Shanghai have been, impacted by that. Factories just are not able to produce at the same rate. We've also got sanctions on Russia. So you've got that whole global supply chain impacted of goods coming out of that region. And then, of course, I think even with the pandemic, global supply chains haven't gone back to what they were. So that's happening on one side. And then on the other side, you've got the rest of the world coming out of the pandemic, wanting to just resume all of their regular spending, having been locked up for 2 years. So they want to go back and they want to consume and they want to buy stuff. And so you've got that huge demand and you've got that, weak supply, and that's what's causing prices to go up. And as well, the problem with this war and everything that's going on is it kind of creates this sentiment of scarcity as well. And that scarcity plays into the prices, the issue of prices.
So are there any general personal finance tips that I guess that you have, Scott, with what you guys do that will help people out and help people cope?
The way I look at this is kind of budget, benefits and the big stuff. And what I mean by that is you need to know your starting point. You need to know what's within your control and what's not. And so kind of starting with a budget and kind of what your spending looks like is the first step, right? What I mean by benefits is kind of there's so many benefits that go unclaimed. Like estimates 15 to 20 billion unclaimed. And I'm talking about the stuff like universal credit, pensions credit, marriage allowance, and so on and so forth. And there's an organisation called Turn to Us. It's a charity which kind of has benefits calculators. You type in your information and it will tell you exactly what benefits you're entitled to. And I would say to everyone, go to Turn to Us.
Go and check it out,
and claim everything you're entitled to. It's really important. I mean, 15 to 20 billion going unclaimed is just, that should be in people's pockets who most need it, most vulnerable. And then what I mean by the big stuff is you've got to look at your bills. Every single bill, including insurances, home insurance, motor insurance. Are you on the very best deal that you can be on?
Lynn, can you just weigh up the pros and cons of, the national insurance rise as it is?
The first problem with the national insurance thing is we've got a bit of a lag. So we've got the 1.25 increase, which is taken effect from right now. But then the change of the national insurance limit, so it's gone up by about £3,000-ish pounds. That doesn't kick in till July. So we've got like 3 months now of people paying more. And also it only impacts certain people. So although I've read varying degrees of how much you need to earn to benefit from this, but it's around £35,000 to £40,000. If you earn less than that, then you will benefit after July. If you earn more than that, then you won't. I'm reticent to comment on the change in income tax in 2 years' time because it's not necessarily going to happen, right? And it's based on the government meeting quite a lot of targets. I mean, who knows what's even going to happen in 6 months, let alone 2 years' time. So it just felt like a bit of a dangling a carrot.
I think the overall sentiment is there needs to be more intervention to really help people, to make sure that, people don't fall into what is, a really, really dire situation.
Money is really tight for a lot of people, and when money is tight, people do turn to credit. Buy now, pay later was already a booming sector. And I've probably got enough to say on that for a completely another episode, right? But people are turning to that. They'll turn to credit cards. They'll dip into their overdrafts. These are potentially expensive ways to borrow. And we're talking about interest rates that are only heading in one direction at the moment, and that's north. So it will become more expensive to borrow. And it's a real problem because it stores problems for the future, people struggling under a mountain of debt. And that's the here and now. There is also a pension implication for that because when there's no money to be, there's no surplus, your savings will shrink to zero, right? You're like pension contributions, right? Maybe we need to cut back on that. So there's a problem well into the future caused by a cost of living crisis in the here and now unless it's dealt with.
One of the last things that people are going to be thinking about doing is paying into a pension. And that is something that it should still be a consideration for the long term. What would you say to that?
I mean, look, it's so important to invest if you can. I mean, investments are going to grow faster than salaries. And at this time when we're talking about all the measures the government didn't do, you can still get tax relief on pension contributions. And that is still free money from the government, which is not very common. And, the worry is, of course, when people see their budgets reduced, they're having to cut certain aspects of their life. You worry that pension contribution is going to be part of that. But ultimately, you're going to retire with a lot less. And, missing out on all those additional years of compounding could potentially have a huge impact on your pot in retirement. So it's something to really think about because, I know a lot of people are in survival mode, but you've also got to think about the long term as well.
I think when most people think about tax specifically, they think about tax as in paying money away to the government. But that isn't always the case with pensions, is it?
The delightful thing about pension tax relief is that the government is paying money back to us, which is not something to be sniffed at in these times. So tax relief on pensions works like this. You get a tax top-up on contributions up to £40,000 or 100% of your salary, whichever is lower. Basic rate taxpayers will have tax relief claimed on their behalf by their employer or by their pension provider. So PensionBee, for example, does that for you, and that tax top-up is worth 25%. So for every £1 you put in your pension, it actually becomes £1.25. So that's all very simple. But you need to go and claim that yourself. So it's totally up to you to do that, and you have to do that through your self-assessment tax return. Now that is something we know that people find overwhelming or daunting, or they're not interested in doing, because as a little bit of tax trivia, we discovered that 1.5 million higher earners do not claim that additional tax relief on their pensions, and they are leaving 2.5 billion unclaimed on the table as a result.
What do you have any tips in that area to help people cope?
Budgeting is another thing that scares people, but you can actually make it quite a simple process. And before you get into this world of sort of understanding what you need to reduce, what you need to save on, you need to understand actually what you're spending. And I think for most people, they don't actually know what they're spending because you're tapping your card here and tapping your card there. So keep a spending diary, like for a few weeks, for maybe a month, and actually understand where your money is going, and then create sort of a realistic budget from that. But be strict with the money that's going out. Like, if you are not, if you're not using it, and if it is a time of struggle, then you absolutely have to cancel it. Get the best deals on everything possible, and maybe tackle like one thing a day, just so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And the savings can build up, and especially when you annualize it, it can be like hundreds,
Quite a bit,
thousands over a year. But I think just set yourself something that's realistic that you are going to be able to stick to. And then, go through all your bills one by one to save as much as possible. Yeah, you absolutely switch your shopping, but there's lots of things you can do with your food shop. Like, you can downgrade on brands. Like, do you need to buy the recognised brands anymore? Maybe go for supermarket brands. Write a meal plan. Go with a shopping list. Don't just randomly go into a shop, or pop to your local co-op every couple of days. There are so many sort of tried and tested ways to save, but you have to be very intentional about it and realistic, and be almost like it feels like it's an extra job at the moment for a lot of people, that it's something they've got to be committed to, and savings can be found. But yeah, it's hard.
Scott, would you add anything to that in regards to tips for the self-employed at all?
Managing a small business, for example, there's many things that you can. They kind of correspond with household management, right? So kind of you've got to make every penny that you spend count, right? And if it's not kind of going towards something which is going to benefit your business, you don't spend it. Going back to household finances, if you're not using a subscription or whatever it may be, it has to go if things are tight. You know, it's all about knowing your ins and outs and spending in the smartest way you possibly can.
And Claire, do you have any tips when it comes to the pension side of things in general, in terms of everything that's going on at the moment?
I mean, as I said, keep up the pension contributions. If you are employed, ask your employer whether you can do salary or bonus sacrifice to save on national insurance. I mean, we should all just become savvy and sophisticated consumers right now. We should be doing everything we can. We should be following Lynn. We should be using Snoop. We should be, doing everything we can to get every trick and tip in the book out there. And the one thing I will say, is not necessarily related to pensions, but don't be afraid to ask for help. If you are in trouble, there is so many charities and organizations out there that will really help you if you're suffering in silence when it comes to debt. If it's comes to the Step Change, the Citizens Advice, National Debt Line, there are so many organisations out there that will know the suffering you're going through if you're in debt and you're not talking to anyone about it and you're really, in a bad place. Also, if you're struggling with living costs, there are resources. Just Google struggling with living costs Citizens Advice. There will be a webpage that will tell you everything you can do to get support with energy costs, support with housing costs, support with if you're struggling to buy food, if you're struggling to buy, all sorts of different products. There are resources out there, and don't be afraid to look for them, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
If you had the ear of Rishi Sunak and you just had 1 minute to share an idea about his tax policy, which could be changed to help people right now, what would that be? I'm going to start with you, Claire.
Okay, Rishi, I want to talk to you, please, about the cost of childcare, specifically. If you are a parent, it is cripplingly expensive, and families around the UK are, dealing with that right now. So I would like the Treasury and Rishi Sunak to mandate gender-inclusive paid parental leave for all parents in the early stages of a child's life. And I would like to mandate affordable childcare in the workplace through employer tax incentives so that women have a choice about when and not whether they return to work. And I have an economic argument because I know the Treasury like those. So basically there was a study and they said that of the women who were struggling to return back to work, 46% said they were prevented from taking on more hours at work as a result of unaffordable childcare. And that's about 1.7 million women.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the economic argument is that if those women had access to adequate childcare services and were able to work the hours that they wanted, they could increase their earnings by 7.6 billion and 10.9 billion a year, which would generate up to 2.8 billion in economic output per year. There we go.
Nailed the numbers.
So there's my ask. I think that might be over a minute though.
Nailed the answers. Scott?
So, I mean, I think it's not so much a tax policy, I think for me, and I've touched upon it earlier, which is all of the benefits that go unclaimed. I would ask the government, Rishi, whoever can make it happen, to make it easier for people to claim that money that they're entitled to, right? I think it's really important. I think Lynn touched upon it earlier, which is kind of it's difficult. It's the forms to fill out. You've got to pick up the phone in some cases, and it's difficult. And it should be made much easier to make sure that that money goes to the people that need it most. I think beyond that, I completely agree with Claire on the childcare situation. Being a relatively new dad, I've got all of that to come in terms of nursery costs. But I think, and there's not necessarily an economic argument that the Treasury would love, but there's a kind of argument for increasing thresholds in line with inflation. And there's quite a lag in so many areas in that sense. It would be something, it's called fiscal drag, and it's kind of, it's the lag is just too deep, I would say, in many cases.
Yeah.
And so more people pay tax.
Yeah. Lynn?
So I think tax policies can be complicated or can be simple, but the £20 universal credit uplift, which was just been taken away, that was a really super simple lever that the government could just switch on, that would give a chunk of money back to the most vulnerable of our society, where there are quite a few sort of tax breaks out there where they're sort of universal to, like winter fuel credit. It doesn't matter how much income is going in that house, people can still get it because it's age based. But it's complex to sort of tier those kind of tax breaks. But just, can we put a little bit of money back into the pockets of people that desperately need it? I'm reticent to the sort of the middle England that I think you referred to them as maybe just needing to cut back a little bit on, change their broadband bill, change their mobile phone bill to save a bit of money. It's very different to the people who are struggling to heat or eat.
Absolutely.
And that's almost a simple change to switch that £20 uplift back on again.
Yeah. Very, very interesting thoughts right there. And look, we don't know we don't even know if Rishi's listening to this, but if he is, hopefully he's got some food for thought right there. Now, before we go, I'd like to say a massive thank you to our guest, Clare Reilly, Chief Engagement Officer at PensionBee, Lynn Beattie, personal finance expert and author of The Money Guide to Transform Your Life, and founder of finance website, Mrs. Mummypenny, and Scott Mowbray, co-founder and Chief Communications Officer at the money-saving website and app Snoop. If you've enjoyed listening to today's podcast, please do give us a rating and subscribe. Every rating and every review that we get really does help us. If you do want to find more information about the topics that we've discussed, you can find some more links in the show notes as well. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or any questions, you can simply send us an email at podcast@pensionbee.com. So that's podcast@pensionbee.com, or you can simply tweet us at PensionBee. Remember, anything discussed in this podcast could not and should not be regarded as financial advice. As with all investments, your capital is at risk. We will be back next month. As always, keep saving and stay pension confident.